What a shame that you're still cleaning other people's houses, my dad said, his voice cutting through the cozy murmur of the living room like a cold wind. We were crowded into my parents' house in Oak Park, a suburb just outside of Chicago, for my cousin Ryan's birthday. The scent of roast chicken mixed with the tartness of fresh lemonade, and the sun streamed in through the bay windows, but none of it could warm the flush rising on my cheeks. Around me, conversation paused. Forks stopped in midair. My Aunt Linda, regal in her burgundy blouse, perched on the edge of the couch and shook her head, her lips pressed tight in disapproval. Across the room, my cousin Vanessa snickered, hiding her laughter behind a napkin. She and her sister Jess had always made a point of wearing their newest designer outfits to these gatherings, and today was no different. They whispered to each other, their eyes flicking to my plain blue dress and the battered boots I'd chosen because they were comfortable, not fashionable. I caught a glimpse of their phones, already typing messages maybe about me, maybe not, but the timing stung all the same. I felt small in that moment, a child again, even though I was 34. I glanced down at my hands, rough from years of hard work, the faint ghost of a cleaning product scent still clinging to my skin no matter how many times I washed them. For a moment, I wanted to shrink into the couch and disappear, to become invisible in the house where I'd grown up, surrounded by people who had no idea who I really was or what I'd built for myself. It wasn't the first time my dad had said something like this, and I doubted it would be the last. For years, I had allowed my family to believe that I was just a cleaner, someone who scrubbed other people's floors for a living. Maybe it was easier than explaining the late nights and early mornings, or the phone calls from clients and investors that seemed to come at all hours. Maybe it was just self-preservation, a way to avoid awkward questions or, worse, envy disguised as encouragement. Or maybe I'd been waiting for the right moment, the moment when my life and all my hard work would finally make sense to them. I forced a smile, picking up my glass of lemonade with a steady hand. Well, it pays the bills, I said lightly, as if it didn't matter, as if their opinions couldn't touch me. The lemonade was tart and sweet, cool against my tongue. Did anyone see the weather for next week? I heard it's supposed to rain. My voice sounded too cheerful, almost brittle, but I managed to steer the conversation away from myself. Someone, mercifully, began to talk about the Cubs game, and the tension in the room eased as laughter returned. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being out of place, as if I didn't belong among these people who shared my blood but not my story. I watched my brother Jack joke with his girlfriend Sarah by the sliding doors to the backyard. They were surrounded by a group of our younger cousins, all in college or starting their first jobs, eager and confident, certain the world would welcome them. I envied their innocence. My gaze drifted to the family photos lining the mantel, me and Jack as children, splashing in Lake Michigan, my mom's arms around us. My dad, years younger and less tired, grilling burgers on the patio. In every picture I looked happy, but I wondered if even then I'd felt the first whispers of difference, the sense that I would never quite fit into the tidy world my parents imagined for me. Cleaning houses had started as a summer job when I was 16, something I did for extra money. I liked the rhythm of it, the satisfaction of order, the gleam of polished wood, the sense of accomplishment in turning chaos into calm. By the time I graduated high school, I knew every trick for getting red wine out of a white carpet, every shortcut for making a room sparkle. But it wasn't just about cleaning. It was about seeing inside the lives of others, glimpsing the private worlds behind their closed doors. After college, I kept at it, first out of necessity, then out of ambition. I'd saved every dollar, invested in better supplies, and built up a client list that spanned the most expensive neighborhoods in Chicago. Some of my earliest clients had become friends, mentors, even business partners. I hired my first employee, a single mom named Jamie, when I was 25, and within 3 years, I had a team of 12. We called ourselves Martha's Elite Cleaning Co., but to my family, I was just Martha, the girl who scrubbed toilets and vacuumed carpets. They never asked about my house in the Gold Coast or the sleek sedan parked in my garage. They didn't know about the contracts I'd signed with luxury hotels downtown, or the meeting I'd just had with a property manager from London interested in franchising my company overseas. To them, I was still their little girl, working hard but never quite succeeding, always coming up just short of the American dream. Sometimes I wondered why I let them think that. Maybe it was easier than trying to explain the complicated realities of success, the risk, the loneliness, the late-night doubts. Maybe I feared they'd see me differently, or resent what I'd accomplished on my own. Or maybe deep down, I wanted them to see me for who I was, not just the role I played at family gatherings. As the afternoon wore on, the party drifted outside to the patio. My mom passed around slices of chocolate cake, and the children chased each other across the lawn, shrieking with laughter. I sat with Aunt Linda, listening as she reminisced about her days in Boston and her travels across Europe. I nodded and smiled, but my thoughts were far away, tangled up in the secret I carried. Inside, my phone buzzed with an email from Bloomberg, confirming my interview for the Billionaires list. My heart skipped. In just a few days, my story would be everywhere, on TV and newspapers, on the lips of people who'd never given me a second thought. I wondered how my family would react when they saw my face on the screen, when they realized that the girl who cleaned houses was a billionaire, her name on a list alongside America's richest. As the sun began to set and the party drew to a close, I said my goodbyes, hugging my parents and promising to visit soon. My dad patted my shoulder, his grip warm but firm, and told me to take care. I smiled, feeling the weight of all the things I hadn't said pressing against my chest. But inside, I knew that everything was about to change. The story they thought they knew was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to show them the truth. No one in my family had ever set foot inside my house in the Gold Coast neighborhood of Chicago. They assumed I rented a cramped apartment somewhere on the city's edge, maybe in an old building with thin walls and rattling windows. That assumption suited me. I never invited them over. I let them imagine my life however they wanted, picturing me tired and humble, quietly working in the shadows of other people's success. They could not have guessed how far my reality was from their perception. The truth was, my home was nothing like what they imagined. The brownstone stood 4 stories tall, its red brick facade restored with care and pride. Inside, every detail reflected the quiet luxury I had earned through my own hands and stubbornness. My kitchen was all white marble and brushed gold, light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows onto spotless countertops. My living room looked out over the park, with velvet sofas and original artwork on the walls, pieces I'd bought from local artists after seeing their work while cleaning galleries downtown. Sometimes, when I watched the sunrise filter through the glass, I thought about all the places I'd cleaned in my early days and how far I'd come. The garage was my guilty pleasure, my secret display of how hard I had worked. Nestled among more practical cars was my pride and joy, a Pagani Zonda HP Barchetta, its body a deep blue with silver trim that sparkled in the city lights. I'd seen a photo of it years before, taped it to my fridge, and promised myself that one day I'd own one. People called it the stuff of dreams, but I didn't believe in leaving dreams unchased. I'd bought the car after I landed my first major hotel contract, paying in dollars I'd earned, not inherited. Sometimes on quiet Sunday mornings I would drive it along Lakeshore Drive, feeling the power beneath my hands, a silent reward for every sleepless night and every moment I'd doubted myself. My wealth was not a gift or a stroke of luck. It was built, mop stroke by mop stroke, from the ground up. I started Martha's Elite Cleaning Co. with nothing but a bucket, a mop, and a battered old van I bought for $1,200. I still remember my first client, a retired teacher named Mrs. Lambert. She paid me $40 to scrub her kitchen and polish her floors. That first check felt like a fortune. I saved every penny I could, buying better supplies as soon as I could afford them and taking on every job I was offered, no matter how late or inconvenient. I cleaned offices at midnight and mansions at dawn. There were days when I barely slept, caught between my cleaning work and a day job answering phones at a law firm, making sure my bills were paid on time. 5 years after I started, I bought my first house. It wasn't much, a small townhouse near Lincoln Park, but it was mine. I kept working, growing my client list through word of mouth and persistence. My big break came when I was asked to clean a luxury condo after a New Year's Eve party. The owner, a sharp-tongued businesswoman from New York, was impressed not just by the shine of her marble floors but by my professionalism and attention to detail. She offered me a contract to clean her offices in Manhattan. That moment changed everything. I began splitting my time between Chicago and New York, sometimes flying overnight just to check on my team in person. With each new contract, my company grew. I learned to navigate the business world, negotiating deals and reading legal documents I barely understood at first. I hired my first employee, then 10, then 100. I invested in training, insisting that everyone who wore my company's uniform shared my standards of excellence. I listened to my employees' stories, their struggles, their ambitions, and found ways to help, offering flexible hours, health insurance, even college scholarships for their kids. The world of business, I quickly learned, was not always friendly to women, especially those without connections. I sat through meetings where men twice my age ignored me, asking questions to my male managers instead. I faced clients who tried to underpay, or who treated me like I was just another cleaner rather than the owner of the company. There were nights when I cried in my car, exhausted and angry, but I never let them see me break. Every insult became fuel. Every doubt, a reason to keep going. Sometimes the hardest part was not the work, but the secrecy. I never told my family about my success. I worried that they would judge the way I'd gotten here, or that they would want to claim part of my story as their own. I imagined my father insisting he'd always known I'd make it, or my cousins suddenly eager to reconnect, asking for loans or favors. The truth was, I wanted them to see me, not my bank account. I wanted to know that their love was for the girl who played soccer in the yard, not the woman whose name appeared in business magazines. Still, the loneliness gnawed at me sometimes. There were moments after a long day of meetings and decisions, when I wished I could call my mom and tell her about the contracts I'd signed, or the time I'd spent in London opening our first European branch. But I kept those stories to myself, writing them down in a leather journal I hid in my knitstand. Maybe one day I would share it all. Maybe when the time was right, I would let them in. For now, I moved through my days like a shadow in two worlds. In one, I was Martha, the cleaner, reliable, and invisible. On the other hand, I was Martha Carter, CEO, entrepreneur, and unbeknownst to my family, one of the wealthiest women in America. I navigated both lives with care, keeping my secrets close and my ambitions closer. Sometimes I wondered how long I could keep it up. I wondered if my family would ever truly understand the path I had chosen, or if they would always see me as the girl with a mop and a dream too big for her good. But then I would walk into my house on the Gold Coast, take in the life I'd built, and know deep in my bones that every sacrifice, every long night, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Everything changed that morning, though it began just like any other. I woke before sunrise. The city was still wrapped in darkness. Light crept softly across the hardwood floors of my bedroom. As I pulled on my robe and padded into the kitchen, I thought only about the day's to-do list meetings with the Chicago team, an evening video call with the London branch, and, if I had time, a quiet drive by the lake. The kettle was barely whistling when my phone rang, the sound startling in the stillness. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I answered anyway, half expecting another last-minute cancellation or an employee calling in sick. Instead, a confident voice greeted me. "Hello, is this Martha Carter? This is Anna White with Bloomberg News." For a second, I couldn't speak. I'd read Anna's stories before, profiles of CEOs, innovators, the kind of people whose success you only ever heard about from afar. My mind raced through possibilities. Was there a problem? Had something happened with one of my contracts? But Anna was friendly, almost excited. She said she'd been following the growth of Martha's Elite Cleaning Co. for months, and that my approach to business, my willingness to invest in people, to expand beyond Chicago and even beyond America was inspiring. She told me that Bloomberg was putting together a special feature for their Billionaires list and that my name had been suggested for inclusion. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt beneath me. I had known, of course, that the business was thriving. I checked the numbers every day. But hearing it from someone else, someone who didn't know me as the family cleaner but as a business leader, felt like waking up in a different life. Anna asked if I would come to their studio for an interview, to share my story and the journey behind the company's success. As soon as I hung up, I stood by the kitchen counter, phone still in hand, and let out a shaky breath. My reflection in the window looked almost unfamiliar, older, perhaps, but also steadier. I thought about all the years I'd spent hiding the truth, about how my family still believed I was just making ends meet, never guessing at the world I built behind the scenes. And now, in 1 week, the whole country, maybe the whole world, would know. The week leading up to the interview passed in a blur. Anna and her team sent a car to pick me up that morning, a black sedan gleaming in the cold light outside my house. I wore a simple navy suit, the kind I reserved for special meetings, and tucked a silver necklace under my collar, my mother's, a small token that reminded me of home. The Bloomberg studio was a world away from the places I usually found myself. Cameras hung from the ceiling, their blinking red lights giving the space an otherworldly glow. Anna greeted me with a warm handshake and led me to a set with plush chairs and soft lighting. She was just as kind in person as she'd sounded on the phone. As we waited for the cameras to start rolling, she told me, "Just speak from your heart. That's what people really want to hear." And so I did. When the interview began, I felt nervous at first, but Anna's questions were thoughtful, her curiosity genuine. She asked about my childhood in Oak Park, about the first houses I cleaned, and how I'd built the business from nothing. I spoke about the late nights and early mornings, about investing every spare dollar into better tools, about the team of women and men who had become like family to me. I described the pride I took in my work and the decision to treat every client, no matter how rich or famous, as someone deserving of respect. I talked about my move to New York and then to London, about the contracts that changed everything, and about the simple joys, a house made clean, a tired worker smiling with relief at the end of a shift. Most of all, I talked about the people. About Jamie, my first employee who now managed a branch of her own, about the scholarships we gave to employees' children, about how my greatest satisfaction came not from the money, but from the community we'd built together. Anna listened closely, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling at my stories. As the interview wrapped up, Anna turned to the camera. "America's newest billionaire," she said, "and perhaps the most humble. Martha Carter proves that you don't have to be born with privilege to build something extraordinary. Sometimes it's the woman with the mop who has the brightest vision." I left the studio feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I had told my story as it truly was, not hidden, not filtered, but open and real. That evening, the segment aired on national television, my face filling screens in living rooms across the country. My name appeared on the Bloomberg ticker, alongside the likes of tech giants and real estate tycoons. The world, it seemed, had finally noticed. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with messages. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out to congratulate me. Employees sent emails filled with pride and gratitude. But what I cared about most was my family's reaction. I knew they watched Bloomberg religiously, especially my dad, who had a habit of leaving the TV on even during dinner. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after the broadcast, my cousin Vanessa sent a text. "Is that really you on TV?" An hour later, my dad called. He didn't say much, just a long pause, then, "We're all so proud of you, Martha." For once, there was no judgment in his voice, just awe and a trace of regret. But the real moment came the next weekend at our family's monthly get-together. This time, I arrived not on foot but behind the wheel of my Pagani Zonda HP Barchetta. As I pulled into the driveway, sunlight danced off the blue and silver paint. The engine's gentle roar turned every head on the lawn. I stepped out in my suit, feeling taller and braver than ever before. Inside the house, the television was on. My name, Martha Carter, flashed across the screen, the Bloomberg segment replaying in the background. Silence swept over the room as I entered. My dad's eyes brimmed with tears he tried to hide. Aunt Linda, who'd always doubted, was speechless. My cousins stared, mouths open, as if they'd just seen a ghost. For the first time, I wasn't just the cleaner in the family. I was Martha Carter, entrepreneur, billionaire, and daughter, standing proud and whole before the people who meant the most to me. When I stepped out of my car that sunny afternoon, everything felt new. It was as if the air itself shimmered with possibility. My dad stood on the porch, arms folded, looking smaller than I remembered. As I walked up the path, his eyes grew wide and his hands trembled just a bit. When I reached him, he didn't say anything at first. He just pulled me into a hug, tighter than any embrace I could recall since childhood. There were tears in his eyes, and I could feel his apology in the way he held me, words struggling in his throat. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in you," he whispered, his voice choked. I smiled against his shoulder, feeling my tears welling. For years, his skepticism had felt like a wall I could never climb. In that moment, it melted away, leaving behind only love and regret. Inside, the house buzzed with energy. My cousins gawked openly at my car, their voices hushed and awestruck. Even Aunt Linda, whose tongue was usually the sharpest in the family, managed to smile. She sidled up to me, her tone softer than I'd ever heard. "Martha," she asked, half joking, "do you think you could teach me how to start a business? Maybe I'm not too old to learn?" We laughed, but I could tell she was sincere. I promised her we'd talk more soon. As we sat around the living room, plates of cake and mugs of coffee forgotten on the table, I finally told them my story. I talked about the long nights cleaning offices after my day job, the endless grind of building a business with nothing but a mop, a bucket, and a dream. I shared how I'd saved every dollar, how I'd invested in better tools, and how I'd never given up even when it seemed impossible. They listened quietly, really listened, some for the first time ever. It felt good to let the truth out, to see the pride in their faces as the pieces of my life came together in their minds. My mom reached over and squeezed my hand. She'd always been quieter than my dad, but I saw now that her silence had been worry, not disappointment. "You were always the hardest worker," she said softly. "I should have known you'd make something beautiful." After that, everything changed. I wanted to share my success, but I wanted to do it right. So I started with my family. The first thing I did was buy my parents a house in a quiet suburb, with a garden for my mom and a sunroom for my dad to read his newspapers. It wasn't the biggest house, but it was filled with light and warmth, a real home. I paid off their debts and made sure they would never have to worry about money again. For my little sister, who had always looked up to me but never quite understood what I did, I set up a college fund. She was just finishing high school and dreamed of becoming a doctor. I wanted her to chase her ambitions without the weight of student loans holding her back. When I handed her the acceptance letter and the check for tuition, she hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "You're my hero," she whispered, and I hoped she'd remember that long after her first anatomy exam. But I didn't stop with just my family. The struggles I faced as a woman entrepreneur stayed with me. I remembered every meeting where I was talked over, every deal where I was underestimated, every door that closed simply because I didn't fit the mold. I wanted to change that for other women, to give them the support I never had. So I founded the Carter Women's Initiative, a foundation dedicated to helping women start and grow their businesses in America and across Europe. We offered grants, mentoring, and workshops, reaching out to women from all backgrounds. The letters and emails I received from our first group of recipients filled me with a pride even greater than making my first million. I also restructured Martha's Elite Cleaning Co. so that employees could buy shares in the company. I wanted them to feel the same sense of ownership and possibility that had driven me. Jamie, my very first employee, was the first to sign up. She cried happy tears in my office, saying she'd never dreamed a cleaner could be a business owner too. It was the best kind of full circle. Through all of this, I never stopped cleaning. Sometimes I'd show up at one of our clients' homes, now some of the most exclusive addresses in Chicago or New York, and roll up my sleeves. My staff would laugh at me, telling me the CEO didn't need to do this, but I'd just smile. Cleaning reminded me of where I started. It kept me grounded, humble, and grateful. There was something meditative about it, the simple rhythm, the transformation from mess to order, the feeling of making a space shine. Even with all the zeros in my bank account, I didn't want to lose the person I was before the success. Now, when people ask what I did for a living, I no longer hesitated or hid behind half-truths. I told them, I'm a business owner, I'm a billionaire. And I'm also someone who cleans her own house, who believes in hard work and kindness, who never gave up. I saw how those words surprised people, challenged their ideas of what success looked like. I hoped it inspired them too. Looking back, I sometimes wondered if things would have been easier if I'd shared my dreams sooner, if I'd trusted my family with the truth from the start. But then I remembered that every journey has its secrets, its stumbles, its lessons. My story wasn't just about making money, it was about building a life with my own hands, about proving to myself that I was enough, just as I was. As the seasons changed and my life settled into this new chapter, I felt a quiet joy that filled me in ways wealth never could. My family was proud. My company was thriving. And women across America and Europe were finding their paths to success. My journey wasn't over. If anything, it felt like it was just beginning. And every so often, as the sun dipped low over the city and the world outside slowed to a hush, I'd slip off my shoes, grab a mop, and clean my kitchen just to remember. $1 at a time, one dream at a time, I had built a future I could finally call my own.